Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to start the first unit, Geometry Foundations. We're going to see what this whole geometry curriculum is like and what we need to know and be able to do here. We're going to start here on day one with some basic geometry vocabulary and symbols. So what are those terms we need to know, many of which you've already seen before, and then how do we interpret some of these symbols that we're going to see in this class? So for this, you're going to need that word chart and, of course, something to write with as we fill in as we go. So our learning target today is that you can interpret and draw geometric figures using the correct symbols and notation. So in days to come, we're going to be taking some time to make sure that you can understand a geometry diagram and use the correct symbols and notation within that diagram. So please be sure that at the end of this lesson today, you have a pretty solid understanding of what these symbols mean. So this is the first chart that goes into your notes. It's points, lines, and planes. Those are going to be the first three words we focus on. And for each one, we're going to draw a model or show what it's drawn or how it looks. Okay. Underneath drawn is more of a description of how we draw it. Named by, and then facts, words, and symbols there. We're going to fill each of these boxes in for these three lines as we go. So let's start with the first one, point. You graphed a lot of these in Algebra 1. They were those dots that you put on the graph, right? Well, yeah, they're still the same thing, except we're going to place a capital letter next to them to mark their location. So in geometry, you will see capital letters signifying points. So they're always going to have a dot. Sometimes they may not be marked with a really big dot, but that's okay. They are going to be named by that capital letter, never a lowercase letter. And some facts about points is that they don't have size or shape. You can't measure a point, okay? It doesn't matter how big or how small that dot is. You can't measure it. It doesn't have an area or a volume or anything like that. Now, if we were going to refer to a point in like a writing or on a diagram or for an answer to a question, you can do that two ways. You can just place the letter there. So if I want to refer to the spot in a diagram labeled with point A, I could just say A, or I could actually write the words point A. To refer to that location as well. Now let's look at a line. So you also graph these in Algebra 1. So lines look like, obviously they're straight. They have two arrows there you see. And our lines are always going to be sure to have 2 points marked on them with those capital letters. Maybe you didn't put capital letters in Algebra 1, but you did have 2 points every time you graphed a line. See the little lowercase next to the line as well? That means something. We're going to get to that in just a minute. So it's always drawn with an arrowhead on each end. That's because lines go on and on forever in both directions. It will always be named by 2 points. So those capital letter A and B on there, we're going to name him using those letters. Or it could be named using a lowercase letter that's written near the line, like the little M you see in this diagram. Now, lines do go on forever in 2 directions, and because they go on forever, they cannot physically be measured. You can't find the length of a line. The arrow implies that it continues to go on. Now, in words or symbols, we could refer to this line as line AB. Notice the A, the B, and the little mini picture of a line above it. You could also call it BA if you wanted to. You could switch those letters around. It's the line that has A and B on it. Or if you want to use that little M next to it, you would write the word line and then M after it. Now let's talk about planes. Again, back to Algebra 1. Planes, you graphed on a coordinate plane. A plane is just a flat surface. So it looks something like this. We always tend to draw these in more of a parallelogram shape to give it 3D dimension. And that's what I would describe if you're going to write yourself a little note there on how do I draw this, more of a parallelogram shape. That's what's mostly used. Notice on this plane there are going to be some points. Sometimes there could be lines, rays, whatever. On this plane there are 3 points with little dots next to them. See it? And then there's a little P up in the corner. That's going to be important in just a second. We can name this plane by using 3 points that are on the plane. So the A, B, and X, or the XBA, or if there were more points on here, we could use any 3 that are on that plane. Or we can name that plane by that capital letter in the corner, the one that isn't next to a dot right there. That also signifies we're talking about a plane. Now, planes don't have thickness, right? So they're not like a big foam mattress pad or anything. They're like the biggest piece of paper you can imagine, super thin, right? They don't have a height, but they go on forever in all directions. So it's like pretty much the biggest piece of paper you can imagine. And now in words or symbols, to refer to this plane, you have to write the word plane in front, and then you can use 3 letters to represent 3 points on that plane. So A, B, X, or the P in the corner, you could also call that plane P. So important facts I'd like you to write into your notes underneath this chart, guys, are that points, lines, and planes are considered to be undefined. That means they don't really have a definition. They can only be explained through examples and drawings. You know, people tend to, pretty much understand these ideas, but they're hard to actually write a formal definition for. It's kind of like the color yellow. How do you define yellow? Well, it's hard to write a definition for that, but you know it when you see it. You can give examples of what it looks like. You can do drawings with color crayons and things to talk about what's yellow and what isn't. But to write a formal definition would be rather challenging. And it's the same idea with these three. A formal definition, they don't lend themselves to that. It's best to just kind of illustrate what they look like in diagrams and drawings. Now, just like when you graphed in Algebra 1 there, 2 points will always define a line. That means you need to have 2 points before you can connect them with a line. And 3 points will always define a plane. Any 3 points I have, I can draw a plane or a flat surface through those 3 points, or that contains those 3 points. Now let's go on to the next word chart, segment, ray, and angle. Again, you might be familiar with these. Let's see what you remember. So segment. Segment is just a small piece of a line. So you notice little dash marks here. We're not talking about the line that goes on and on forever here. Just from A to B, start to end, A and B are the 2 end points of the segment. So it's drawn by like a piece of a line with 2 endpoints. It's named by the 2 letters that are on the endpoints. And because it does not go on and on forever, it has a length that can be calculated or measured. So in words or symbols, it's just like when we would label the line AB, except we don't put a little mini line above it. It's a little mini segment. So no arrows above, but AB or BA, if you want to go from right to left there, it doesn't really matter what order you put those guys in. They're both on that segment. Okay, let's look at rays. Rays, the model or what a ray looks like is this picture right here. A ray has 1 endpoint. See the endpoint at A? That's called the initial point. That's where it starts. And then the ray kind of shoots out in one direction through B, C in this case, arrow on one end. So it has an arrow that has 1 endpoint, okay, and it goes through another point, at least one other point. In this case, it goes through 2. It's always going to be named using just 2 letters though. Even though this ray has 3 points on it, we only use 2 letters to name a ray, just like we use 2 letters to name a segment and 2 letters to name a line. The letter you start with though can't be mixed around. This one has to use the initial or the starting point letter going first to signify really that it's starting at A and going through other dots or other points here. It extends forever in one direction, so rather than 2 directions like a line, it's only going on forever in one direction. And in words or symbols, this ray we would call ray AB. It starts at A, goes through B. Or we could call it ray AC, starting at A and going all the way through C. They're both talking about the same ray. Okay, now let's take a look at the last one, angle. Our model for an angle, or what we would draw or look at when we see an angle, looks like this. You have 3 letters or 3 points, A, B, and C here. One of them is at the vertex or the pointy part of the angle, and the other 2 are on the sides. They're drawn as 2 rays that share a common endpoint. So in this case, my common endpoint, or where the 2 rays come together, that's at B, right? It's named by 3 letters most of the time. Or you can name it as the letter on the vertex if there's no confusion as another angle B in the picture or somebody else that could be that angle. It can be measured in both degrees and radians. You might be familiar with measuring angles in degrees. Measuring angles in what's called radians is something that will probably be new to you and something that enriched geometry does quite a bit. And now words and symbols, ladies and gentlemen, if I was going to refer to this angle, I would call him angle. See the little mini angle picture above or next to those 3 letters? Angle ABC or angle CBA, those are both completely acceptable. The B is in the middle in both, just like the B being the common endpoint that those 2 rays share. B has to be in the center. Now, like I said before, if there was no confusion, like there's no other angles drawn on this slide, we could refer to this as angle B. You would know exactly what angle we're talking about because there are no other angles here that could have B as that vertex, okay? So we've just taken a look at 6 major words, written some basic facts about what we need to know for geometry here, and I think we should be good. Thank you very much for taking lovely notes.